Welcome to this session of Pursuing God with David while quarantined. David was known as a man after God's own heart and as a great warrior. And we see that David fought many battles and was very successful as a warrior. But today in 1 Samuel 19 and 20, we see that perhaps one of the greatest battles that David fought wasn't against the Philistines, wasn't against the enemy on the outside, but the enemy close to him. King Saul, who should have been David's greatest inspiration, David's greatest encourager, became his greatest enemy. He was jealous, he was envious, he even tried to kill David. He should have appreciated what David was doing, because David was defeating their common enemy, the Philistines, having great success. And yet, King Saul did not appreciate David because he was jealous of him and envious of him. Sometimes, when we are fighting the battles that God has given us, when we are walking the path God has put us on, we'll find that our greatest enemies, those that are most critical of us, those that are most discouraging to us, are people that are close to us, who should be our greatest asset, become our greatest discourager. People who look at us and do not see the good that God is doing, but for some reason look at us with jealousy or envy or anger. And for some reason they're a discouragement, not an encouragement to us. And so when we find that to be true, what is our response? What should we do? Well, what did David do? David did not retaliate against Saul. He did not get angry back at Saul. He did not get hurt feelings towards Saul. He simply tried to continue to do what God had told him to, tried to serve God. He didn't understand it. In fact, the first verse of chapter 20 says, David quotes David, "What have I done?" He doesn't understand what is going on. And many times we don't understand that either. But at the same time, David did not retaliate against Saul. He just tried to do what God had called him to do. And we see that in Jesus' life as well. That Jesus did not retaliate. That he did not try to get revenge. That though he was mocked and scourged, Peter says, that he entrusted himself to God. And Paul says the same thing. He said, Alexander the metalworker did me great harm. The Lord will repay him. And so we should not be surprised that sometimes our greatest battles aren't those on the outside, but those on the inside, spiritual battles. Not from strangers, but from people in our family, in our church, in our close circle. Those become our greatest battles, spiritual battles. And that's going to happen. But when they do, and when they are discouraging, when they are critical, our response is very important. We don't need to respond back to them in kind. We don't need to retaliate against them. We need to continue doing what God has called us to do and entrust them to God. Give them into God's hands. He'll take care of that. It is up to us to follow Jesus, to do what we're called to do. Now, but let's not forget that even though David had a great enemy in Saul, he also found a great friend in Jonathan, Saul's son. And so while we will have enemies, we'll also have friends and encouragement. And don't let those that are discouraging us, hindering us, blind us to those who are encouraging us and standing by our side, because they're there as well. So let's receive the encouragement from those who are with us, those who see God working, and God puts into our lives to help us. But let's not get distracted by those around us who will try to discourage us and be critical and get us off track. Now, there's nothing they can do to stop what God is doing in our life unless we let Him. As long as we keep our eyes on Jesus, we don't retaliate, we commit them to God's hands, continually walk in the path He has put before us, God will accomplish what He is going to do in our life. And we will see that David will become king, and Saul sadly will meet an untimely end. But God was with David, and God continued to be with David. So be encouraged today. You know, today there may be people in your life that are discouraging you and trying to hinder you. Don't let that put you down. Don't let that hinder your walk with God. Continue to serve Him and walk with Him and trust them to God. Pray for them. Pray for yourself. Look around and find the friends that God has put in your life that encourage you and appreciate them. But don't stop walking the path God has put you on. He will accomplish His plan in you as you are obedient to Him. Thank you for joining us today. I'll see you Monday for another version of Pursuing God with David while quarantined.